Hello, I'm Melinda James. Welcome to Stateline and the 2008 election debate. The starter's gun has been fired and Territory voters will go to the polls in a fortnight. Labor's Paul Henderson is asking voters to re-elect his government to give certainty to the Impex gas project. The Country Liberals' Terry Mills says that's a furphy and the election is about law and order. The two leaders join me now to make their election pitches and discuss the issues affecting you. Paul Henderson, Terry Mills, welcome to Stateline.
Thank you, good to be here.
We've tossed a coin to see who gives their opening address first, and the Chief Minister won. So, Paul Henderson, why should Territorians vote Labor?
Thank you, Melinda, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk directly with Territorians this evening. As I said when I became Chief Minister, the Territory is the best place to live, work and raise a family, and I want to continue the fight to make sure we continue to be the best place to live, work and raise a family. We've got record economic growth, delivering jobs right across the Northern Territory. I'm proud that we've seen 10,000 apprentices and trainees commence their apprenticeships over the last 4 years. I'm proud that we've protected the Daly River by having a moratorium on the Daly and extended that for another 2 years. And we've got record numbers of teachers, doctors, nurses and police right across the Territory. But there's more to do. That's why I'm fighting so hard for the Impex project for the Northern Territory, a project that would deliver an additional $50 billion worth of income into our economy over the next 20 years. We want to see more police, doctors, teachers and nurses across the Territory, and very importantly, my plan to close the gap on Indigenous disadvantage, an extra $286 million on improving services in the bush over the next 5 years. These are the issues that the election's going to be fought on.
Paul Henderson, your time is up, but Terry Mills, why should the Country Liberals get Territorians' votes?
Well, on August the 9th, we've been called to a very early election, and the Chief Minister says that it's about Impex. Now, the Chief Minister knows that that's not the case because the Chief Minister and I had the same position on that. And we put that aside. He knows very well, as I do and most Territorians know, the core issue here is getting on top of law and order. After 7 years, Labor has lost the fight against crime. It's an 83% in violent assaults across the Territory. All the things the Chief Minister's just spoken about will mean little if we can't get on top of that problem. Of 7 years of policy failure, most of that time Paul was the Police Minister, now he's the Chief Minister, going to an early poll, I think demonstrates a lack of courage to face up to the real issues that need to be attended to by a Chief Minister, and pulling out early and going to an early poll I think is frankly wrong.
Well, several issues raised there by each of you, and hopefully we'll get to most of them this evening. Chief Minister, if I can start with you. You've said this election is about providing certainty to Impex, that you're 100% committed to the project going ahead. Does that mean Territorians can expect a Labor government to comply with 100% of Impex's demands and desires?
I am 100% committed to securing this project. As I said, Belinda, $50 billion worth of additional income into our economy over the next 20 years.
But will you give the company whatever they ask for?
The company will have to comply with the strictest of the Territory's environmental regulations and legislation, as well as Commonwealth environmental regulations and legislation.
Will you refer the project to the EPA?
There will be no free ride here. They will have to comply with the Territory's environmental legislation and the Commonwealth's environmental legislation. There will be no shortcuts, and they will have to comply absolutely with that legislation. We can have the $12 billion worth of investment in our economy, the 4,000 jobs, and we can also protect Darwin's Harbour. We can have both.
One of the bargaining chips here is gas reservations for domestic use. Are we giving up an opportunity here to get cheaper gas for Territorians?
The Territory has already secured our gas supplies for 25 years through the ENI Blacktip projects in the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf, so our gas supplies are secure. My opponent, Terry Mills, has suggested that we should have a gas reservation policy.
No, that is not the case.
Can I put this to Terry Mills?
Absolutely untrue.
You've said you're 110% committed to the gas plan.
110%.
Where do you stand on negotiating for some domestic sale of the gas that will come on shore?
That issue, look, we fully support the project. We need these kinds of projects. But there's a complete furphy of the Chief Minister to suggest that I'm talking about a legislative regime to require this company to provide gas. I don't interfere in market forces, but at least this Chief Minister could go and have a discussion about these things so we can have some forward planning where we're actually going to be able to get our future long-term gas from.
How hard would you push negotiations for domestic sale of gas from Impex?
It's in our joint best interest to enable the proper discussions to occur so we can have longer term plans. Now, to bail out of those discussions as you fly off to Japan, I think is showing a lack of leadership. We need to ensure that we're getting more than a construction project here, that we will have a longer term plan that we can build a future on.
So do you think there should be some gas set aside for domestic use for Territorians from the
No, I don't agree with means to control those measures, but it can be brokered through proper and sensible negotiations. But there should never be a bind. I don't believe in that kind of interference in the free market. However, if two parties can get together and if the Chief Minister has the sort of relationship he claims to have, then at least you should be able, in the best interests of this community, have that kind of discussion.
Well, can I ask you, Paul Henderson, there does seem to be bipartisan support for this project.
There is.
The Labor leader, the leader of the Country Liberals have both said that they support the project. So isn't your reason for going to an election early based on a false premise?
Can I say that Terry, as my opponent, has had more positions on INPEX, and those positions change every day. He said that the project should not go to Middle Arm, it should go to Glide Point.
Your government once held that same position.
Until I pointed out it would cost $500 million on duplicating
Paul, show us
the
those
infrastructure.
figures.
Those figures are
Come
there.
on.
He had
You
his
make
go,
them up.
Melinda. Can I have my say? $500 million to duplicate the infrastructure. As recently as April this year, Terry Mills wrote to everybody in Darwin and Palmerston saying that as the leader of the opposition and a potential Chief Minister, he would fight against this project.
Oh, come on.
He actually called it a 19th century project that does not belong in Darwin Harbour. Now, you have no commitment to this project. You've fought against it all the time. The only time that you have supported it was when you came under intense pressure from the business community, and as recently as April this year, you wrote to everybody in Darwin and Palmerston saying you were against this project. It was a 19th century project and it should not go to Middle Arm. That was your position.
Terry Mills, your position.
OK, what I told Territorians that this is a government after 7 years failed to plan and left Territorians with no option.
The plan was always to put
you left us with
LNG
no
industry
option.
on Middle Arm. That was the plan. It's a good plan.
Always wanted the project. The project is very important to the Territory, but you, with your failure to plan, left us with no option but the harbour. That's the issue. That's where you're exposed.
You called it a 19th century plan, and you now support a 19th century plan? Those were your words.
Terry Mills, can I ask you then?
Flip-flopped all over on this.
You failed your obligation to plan adequately for the future, and we were left with no option.
Well, Terry Mills, can I say that
you
did say that you've changed your mind about this project after talks with the company convinced you that the harbour should be the site. Do you think the fact that you stated your opposition publicly before you'd armed yourself with all the facts might reasonably make INPEX nervous about your judgment when they're preparing to invest possibly up to $12 billion?
Not at all. The INPEX know this, and the Chief Minister knows this. The only issue has been this government's failure to plan when it became clear that it was simply not possible to have any other option because of the failure to plan. Having always supported the project, we have to concede that there is no alternative but the harbour because of this government's failure to plan. However, further to that, we would put $30 million on the table, if elected to government, to provide the alternative industrial estate, something that this government once talked about, once believed in, but have failed to act on it, and we've only got it in the harbour. Where will the rest of the development take place? We need that kind of investment. Haven't heard that sort of talk from this Chief Minister. He's hanging it all on the gas project, and he thinks that this is what the election's about. It's in fact about law and order and the 83%
we'll get
increase
to law and
in
order
violent assaults.
in a moment, but is that true? Are you hanging the Territory's future on this one project?
Hanging its political future.
This project would deliver, as I've said, Melinda, $50 billion worth of additional revenue into our economy over the next 20 years. That's a prize worth fighting for, a prize that I'm 100% committed to securing for the Northern Territory. Now, my opponent was briefed by INPEX some months ago, was told that Glide Point was not an option, that they would have to go to West Australia.
Because you had not made it available.
And he went out after that briefing and said they should go to Glide Point. He has had more positions on this. He has flip-flopped all over the issue. You have to be 100% committed. You have to demonstrate 100% honesty when you're dealing with these companies, and that is something that you failed to do. And can I just say, Belinda, we are protecting Glide Point for the environment.
Plan yourself out of a paper bag.
We have protected Glide Point for the environment.
What about
that was a planning decision.
What about the protection of the harbour?
I can guarantee, Melinda, that we can have the $12 billion worth of investment, the 4,000 jobs in the construction phase, and a pristine Darwin Harbour. I give Territorians an absolute assurance. LNG is a non-polluting industry, and again, my opponent here is questioning that you can have the IMPEX plant in the harbour. In the statement that he's just made just then, it just shows he's not committed to the project. He never has been, and he still isn't.
Very briefly, Terry.
Oh, come on. That's just nonsense. Support the project. Always have. The underlying issue is the failure to plan. Chief Minister, where will further industrial development take place in the Northern Territory?
Well, it depends on the type of industry.
Where will it go? Have you got any plans?
Okay. Gas-based industry will be at Middle Arm.
Where's Dow Chemical going to go? Got a plan for that?
That is the plan, to have gas-based industries at Middle Arm and to secure $12 billion worth of investment.
Where's Dow Chemical going?
4,000 jobs for the Northern
Where's
Territory.
The industrial estate?
And that is the plan.
We will have to.
You got a plan?
We will have to move on. Paul Henderson, can I ask you about the potential impact of this project on housing affordability? Yep. House prices might rise, but the rental crisis will worsen. The Chamber of Commerce says land release is the answer, and your government is dragging its heels on that.
Well, we're just about to announce a successful tender for the Bellamac, 700 blocks of land to be released in Bellamac. The headworks are already going in. We have Lyons that is currently, land is for sale at Lyons, another 400 to 500 blocks at Lyons, and we've got further plans to develop between Palmerston and Darwin. So we have a plan for land release right throughout Darwin, and very importantly, Belinda, all future land release in the Northern Territory will have a requirement under my government for 15% of those house blocks to be available for low-income owners, public housing and first-home buyers.
Terry Mills, how would you manage that fine balance between ensuring that house prices don't fall and easing the pressure on renters?
Well, we talk about a fine balance at the moment. To buy a house is $500,000 roughly in the top end here. Rents are the highest in the nation. Darwin's more expensive than Sydney. Now, you need to have an adequate supply of land, and that is one of the core responsibilities of a government. What they've failed to do, we've had a press release from Delia Laurie telling us that Bellamac should already be announced. We've got in the middle of an election campaign, we've got some assurance that something's going to happen at long last. What we need to do is to streamline the processes to ensure that developers and government work together to fast-track these processes. It's just no end of delay to get the land released. You have an opportunity, and you have failed that opportunity in 7 years, and the pressure has been borne by Territorians and young families who just can't get into the market.
OK, we will have to move on. Can I move on to what is clearly the cornerstone issue of your campaign, which is law and order? You say there's been an 83% increase in violent assaults in the past 7 years. Now, that's due to changes in the way police report domestic violence, isn't it? Oh,
really? You talk to Territorians.
But is that figure, is that what the increase in that figure is due to?
These are ABS figures. You can't dispute these figures. And those figures are backed up by the stories that are told right across the Territory.
But damn statistics, I mean, what do they actually say? Are they talking about the increase in domestic violence, in the reportage of domestic violence, or is it an increase in violent assault?
It's an increase in violent assaults across the Territory.
Largely fuelled by domestic violence.
Well, the Chief Minister will try and explain it away, but these figures of 83% increase, a startling increase in 7 years, is a story that are not just statistics. They are figures that are reflected in the stories of many Territorians.
But if we do take the understanding that the increase in these in the rate of violent assault is partly due to the police reporting of domestic violence, how is installing street lighting and closing public laneways going to reduce domestic violence?
Because if domestic violence is a problem.
What would you do to try and solve that problem?
We've already put on the table something that the Labor government rejected. Now they've changed their position on this, but there needs to be mandatory reporting. However, across the territory there has been a surge in violent assaults, and we're seeing evidence of that in stories in the paper, on the television, and wherever you go. Now, we talk about streets, we've got young thugs running the streets. You need to have measures to deal with this. The real problem is that there is no real consequence for breaking the law, and people know that.
We'll get onto that. We'll get onto your mandatory sentencing regime in just a moment, but if I could ask Paul Henderson, Labor's pledged to put police shop fronts in shopping centres. Let's take Casuarina as an example. There's a police station right across the road. Why aren't the police patrolling the shopping centre now?
Well, Belinda, this is a territory first. This is about 5 police beats in our shopping centres.
Isn't it an indictment on Casuarina Police that they're not keeping law and order in the shopping centre?
There are occasions when Casuarina Police do patrol Casuarina Shopping Centre. This is about having a permanent police presence, 2 police on the beat all the time that Casuarina Shopping Centre is open, and I believe will be a very real deterrent about youth gang-related activity, youth-related crime and assaults in that area. Police on the beat are going to deter crime. They will be there to deal with the issue when it occurs, and it will make our shopping centres safer places to shop, safer places to work across the territory. The announcement I made the other day has been very well received.
Terry Mills, if I can ask you about your mandatory sentencing policy, it seemed to change on the run, didn't you? Toughening your stance on suspended sentences for first-time offences, that seemed to change after you saw what Labor was promising. Is this good policy, or are you just trying to gazump in the bidding war to see who's tougher on law and order?
The position hasn't changed. There needs to be
We've had more positions on this issue.
There needs to be certainty. And the Chief Minister can pass this line off the community that, yeah, you'll serve real jail time. That's until the rising of the court.
Didn't you have to issue a clarifying statement, though?
Not at all. It was
you
just...
did 3 hours after I did my press release yesterday.
Because you had to
further strengthen your position because you'd
deliberately misunderstand. Let's go to his police. Let's go to his police in the shopping centres. Now, that's a good... it appears to be good, but the
underlying... You support that policy?
Well, I'd say it looks good, but the underlying problem is that those that are going to be apprehended have absolutely no fear of any consequence. Nothing's going to occur once the hard-working coppers apprehend someone. Where is the tough youth camp that is going to effectively deal with a young offender and change their behaviour?
We've got 3.
They're not really... No,
We've got 3.
They're not boot camps.
Yeah.
I know those camps.
I'd like to get onto the mandatory sentencing issue, though. There are more people in prison than ever before. Sending people to jail hasn't worked so far. Why would it start working now?
Well, first up, you've got to have a consequence. That's the message that I get when I talk to people across our community. There is no consequence of any meaning to an offender. As a result, there is no fear. There's no fear of anything ever happening to them. Now, that's got to be established first. You're establishing a respect for the law and that there is a direct consequence, and you're reinforcing a principle that sits in our community.
So you believe the threat of jail would act as a deterrent to people who are about to commit a violent assault?
It does 2 things. It is a deterrent and also reinforces community standards. The next thing, once being incarcerated, I think it's very important to recognise you send a strong message, but you also deal with the problems, the underlying problems you have with those that are in prison. I don't believe in a prison system that has people locked up to smoke and play cards. You need to deal more effectively with those that have been incarcerated. That's why I believe in the raft of options you need a serious boot camp to deal with hardcore young offenders.
Okay, Terry Mills, I'll have to ask the same question to you, Paul Henderson. Your government has presided over the largest increase in prison numbers in the Territory's history. Why would prisons start working now?
Well, look, I believe that if you commit a serious violent offence, and the one thing I will agree with Terry Mills about...
But do you think it will reduce violent crime into the future? I
believe that if you commit a serious violent offence, if you glass somebody in a pub, if you break into somebody's home and belt them up with an iron bar, you should go to jail. First time, no second chances. It is a deterrent, but it has to be a punishment. And I'm determined to send that message to the courts that people who commit a serious violence offence should go to jail. First time, no second chances. We'll make that very clear when we introduce the legislation if we return to government.
OK, we will have to move on.
Hang on. Chief Minister, you've asserted this, just as you've asserted in 2005, there are going to be new tough measures. Why have you run from the opportunity to make that law in August? Why have you cut and run and gone to an early election? You could have made that law in August in the Parliament of the Territory and backed your words just then with real law. Why have you run? Why have you cut and run? Why have you avoided...
Very briefly, Chief Minister, because we will have to move on.
I have to answer that. I have made it very clear we will introduce that legislation.
Oh, come on.
As opposed to the Leader of the Opposition here. He's had more policy positions on this issue, even in the last 24 hours. 3 weeks ago, he had television ads on air saying, if you go to court on a first serious violence offence, I'll let the courts deal with the issue. You can't trust anything he says.
Look,
he has a different position every 24 hours.
We do have to
move
move
on.
on.
No apology about toughing it up, mate.
Well, both of you seem to agree on impacts and the value it will bring to the Territory. Both of you claim to be tough on law and order. Now let's go to some real points of difference. Let's go to some real points of difference here. The road toll now stands at 38 compared to 25 this time last year. If the intention of the government's road safety laws, particularly the introduction of speed limits on open roads, was to save lives, they're not working, are they?
Look, the road toll is tragic. It absolutely affects us all, and we all know people who've been seriously injured or killed in road accidents. It's absolutely tragic, and it should not be a political football. We introduced a whole raft of measures to try and change the culture and driving behaviour across the Northern Territory that sees us with an appalling road toll. We've announced just the other day further measures in terms of an alcohol interlock device to deal with people who are repeat drink driving offenders. There's no single simple issues to this, Melinda, but it should not be a political football, and this is an issue about changing the culture of bad driving across the Northern Territory.
Okay.
The
Paul
road
Henderson,
toll
I'll have
is
to go
tragic.
to Terry Mills. It is a political issue. Your predecessor, Jodine Carney, promised to reintroduce open speed limits, and you've said you'll honour that promise. What would you do to reduce the road toll in that case?
You've got to apply your policy effort in the areas that count. Now, clearly the policy structure that has been put in place by this government has failed. Now, it's clear, and that's tragic. If you put your policy effort in the right place, that being police more heavily those that drink and drive, make sure that people wear seatbelts and ensure that there are adequate penalties to enforce that. Police what you can police.
You don't think the penalties are tough enough?
They are not affecting the appropriate changes. That's where the problem lies. And further to that is appropriate measures around young drivers, proper education for young drivers, and measures such as the one that's been introduced to make sure that, say, for example, a young driver should not carry any other passenger other than one passenger after 10 o'clock. That's been introduced in other states. Now, Victoria has introduced also a raft of measures, and they have seen significant improvements.
Okay.
But we're waiting to see whether there is going to be change. This is very serious business, and the policy effort is in the wrong place.
Okay, we are running out of time. If I could move on to the issue of leadership for both of you. Paul Henderson, if Labor loses seats, will that be an indictment on your leadership, given that you've now been at the helm for 6 months?
Look, I believe that this election is about leadership. It is about securing the Territory's future or putting the future of the Territory at risk. I believe that every single vote is there to be fought over and talked over the next 2.5 weeks. I don't take a single vote...
Will you feel pressure from your party if Labor loses seats? Will it be an indictment on your leadership?
Every single seat will be hard fought and will be absolutely hard to win. A handful of votes in a number of seats could see those seats change hands, and as the leader of the Labor Party, I believe that we have to go out there and engage with Territorians, as we are, right across the Northern Territory, to retain their trust for another 4 years in office, and I will be doing that every moment of every day until August the 9th.
Terry Mills, can I ask you, this is your second tilt at the leadership, and you stepped down a few months before the last election saying that you weren't ready for the role. Now, potentially after this election, you might have 3 colleagues breathing down your neck, possibly David Tollner, Gary Lambert, who's said publicly that he wouldn't mind a shot at the top job, and Jodine Carney, who's left the door open to challenge. What are voters supposed to think about your credentials as a leader?
Life is a great teacher, and what doesn't hurt you makes you stronger. And I stand strong today as a leader, but the issue of leadership, as the Chief Minister is describing it, is in fact on his account. If a leader has the opportunity to run the full course and instead calls an early election. Why has he done that? Is it about IMPEX? No, it's not. It's
Yes,
about
it
a
is.
failure
Yes,
to
it is.
deal with law and order in our community. That's an absolute failure. And I
Do
think
you expect to be the leader of the country Liberals after this election?
Yes, I do.
You do?
I do.
Okay, even do you expect a challenge for the leadership?
No, I don't. I mean, the only thing I'm concerned about is providing quality leadership and addressing the issues that concern Territorians. That is what preoccupies me. An honest assessment of what Territorians need now, and this is a time of leadership like no other. We've had the rise of violent assaults across the territory of 83%, and we need to get on top of that. Labor has lost the fight against crime. Why go to the polls early? Why are you going to the polls early, Paul?
Can I just go to this issue of...
Well, can I ask you just for the record, Paul Henderson, when was it decided that August the 9th would be polling day? Didn't you decide on this date months ago? Can you categorically tell me this date wasn't decided months ago?
I can categorically say it wasn't decided months ago. It was decided very, very recently after I signed a framework agreement giving IMPEX absolute certainty of what land is available at Middle Arm and the terms and conditions of that land. That's when I made the decision to call the election for August the 9th. Can I just deal with this issue
very
about
quickly? We're about to run out of time.
Increase in crime? 50% of that is domestic violence. It is a tragedy. My opponent has got a one-shot in the locker campaign here. He's campaigning on one issue.
We have to wrap it up.
And certainly we are campaigning across a whole range of issues in the territory.
That is all we have time for. Terry Mills and Paul Henderson, thank you for being with us. You can have another look at today's debate and access a transcript of the show via the ABC website, www.abc.net.au/news/NT. The Pollies have been out in force campaigning at the Darwin Show, and we'll leave you with some happy snaps of punters enjoying all the fun at the showgrounds. Have a great weekend.